ecologist. As I mentioned, I'm the president of the state chapter of the Wildlife Society. I have a role as a land manager, but a lot of my land management, we focus on wildlife. We do a lot of wildlife work as well, including deer management, from deer management to managing amphibians and on viruses with amphibians to the bears, bobcats, other species. And a lot of our work is done with cameras. But it's always great to get our hands on bears too occasionally. Here is just some of my past experience with bears. The corner picture there, you'll see that is myself and my professor in college. This is 1999 in March in Maine at a bear denning. And then the lower picture there is me giving a presentation in 2015 when the first bear in the state of Indiana showed up in 170 years. And so I was put in charge of managing that situation. And the last picture is me with a cub, and that is from last March at Harriman State Park. We did a bear denning with the Department of Environmental Conservation for New York. And so the one thing this shows is I have not aged well. So just want to go through some basics on bears. So these are the 3 North American bears, but we only have one bear located in the eastern US, and that is the black bear. The other 2 bears, the polar bear and the brown bear, you know, I can do talks on them too, but they're not in this area. The black bear, it has, it's not a real big animal. It's a stocky animal. It's about 3 feet tall at the shoulder when it's on all 4s. And it's about 5 feet from its nose to its tail. And bears do have a tail. Many people don't realize that. The tail is very short though. What we do have is the bears, when they do stand up, they're about 6 feet tall when full grown. They can get taller than 6 feet, and you'll see one of those photos as I show in my presentation. But many of the bears that we see around our area are much smaller than this. We get these young males coming in. And so what we have is a bear here, typical bear. Why is he standing? A lot of people ask. That'll be one of the questions. Why is the bear standing up? Is that the, you know, kind of when he sees people or anything? Usually bears will stand when they want to get a better perspective. They usually use it to smell better, to hear better, and to see better. And that's the reason they stand. The average male bear weighs about 300 pounds, and the average female bear weighs about 180 pounds. And that has increased significantly over the last 20 years. Those numbers were, you know, like 250 and 125 only 20 years ago. You know, I'll talk about reason for that a little bit as we move on too. And so they're also plantigrade, and which means they're flat-footed. So they walk like people. They use a heel and their pad of their foot to walk, but that doesn't mean they're slow. They can run up to 30 miles an hour. And so if people say, well, bear chased me, but I got away, more than likely the bear wasn't chasing you because they can outrun you very quickly. So, or they were chasing for fun, more like a kind of an amble behind someone as opposed to actually kind of trying to catch you. And so, you know, they can move fast, and not only can they run fast, they can climb extremely fast. They're agile climbers. They spend much of their time particularly during the summer, up in the tree canopy. And so during the day, they won't be wandering around. They'll be up in the tops of the trees. And then they'll come down during the day. They'll take and jump in some water, cool off, and then climb back in the trees and let the breeze blow through. Again, they love water. They're proficient swimmers. In salt water, they've been known to be found 9 miles out into the Gulf of Mexico. In freshwater, they can cross lakes, and they have crossed major rivers like the Ohio, the Delaware, and the Mississippi. They have exceptional hearing and smell, as I mentioned. As they said, standing here to take more in, that a lot of times you'll see how he leans his face, he'll lean his head down, he'll drop his mouth, he'll take in through that large snout all that they can smell, and they can smell for several miles, pick up scents. And this allows them to be efficient in finding food. And that's a major goal for a bear, because bears are what we call hibernators. And the reason it's in quotes there is because bears are not true hibernators. Bears do not spend their time like a woodchuck or other species that will drop their body temperature and almost are in a coma state near death, and be completely still. If you pick up an animal like that that's in the middle of their hibernation, they will not move. But a bear, it keeps its body temperature high, it keeps its heart rate high. And if you actually have the opportunity to look into a den, most of the time the bear is looking back at you. And so they're conscious and aware, but they're kind of this lazy sleep. I describe for people, it's kind of that sleep in the morning when you're supposed to get out of bed, but you don't want to, but you're half awake and half there. But if somebody came in, you're awake, but then you're going to be like, oh my God, an hour's passed. That's what they're in. But they do that for 4 to 6 months. They don't go to the bathroom. They don't eat. And unlike hibernators, because most people don't realize that hibernators actually all wake up periodically, bring their body temperature back up. They come out, they eat a little bit, they will go to the bathroom, and then they go back in, they fall back into that hibernation. Bears will not do that. And it's amazed people, and many people have tried to study it over the years for medicine or other things. Because they keep their body temperature high, they lose a lot of weight. And so over winter, they can lose up to 50% of their body weight, particularly for a female who has cubs. And what helps them to gain that weight back is that they're omnivorous. This means that they eat both meat and vegetables. And so they're much like us in their diet. Though we come out in the spring, they'll start eating a lot of grass, but they'll find anything possible. Everybody says they like beehives. Well, the reason they like beehives isn't so much for the honey. Yeah, they get a boost from the sugar, but they're in there to eat the bees. The bees are a high source of protein, and so they're going after those. They're always looking for sources of protein. Sugar, they'll take it when they can get it, and they do enjoy it. But if you were to give them, say, a bear a container of peanut butter and give them a container of marshmallow fluff, they'll eat both, but they'll eat the peanut butter first. You shouldn't know why I know that, but we have had people who, that's what they tend to do, is they see a bear and they start giving them food. So the problem where we see is because bears are omnivorous and because in the spring they come out very hungry from being hibernators, this is why they become problems for many people. So where do they live? Well, bears, black bears, occupy pretty much all the forested portions of the United States, or can. And we've had reintroductions of them in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Florida. They are known to, they occur all the way from Mexico to Maine and, up into Alaska, in all different habitat, but typically it's forested. It may be, dense mesquite in Texas, in East Texas and or West Texas and in Mexico, and it may be, dense hemlock forest up in Canada, but it's usually forest habitat. And so when settlers came here, they had never seen this species before. This was only known to North America. And so when they arrived here, this is what they saw. And they said, that is the black bear. And that's what they named it. But the scientific name is Ursus americana, which means American bear. And that's more appropriate because 50% of the bears in the western part of the country are that color, brown. And so many people mistake seeing grizzly bear in Yellowstone for actually seeing a black bear. So what you always want to look for is those nice big ears. You won't see ears on a grizzly bear, almost anything. You'll see the face first over the ears, but the ears are really stand out on a black bear. Then in the Southwest, you have blonde bears. And some people are like, well, yeah, it's hot down there. You can't be black down there. Well, then in the Pacific Northwest, we have white ones. This is a rare bear that we have up there. It's not albino. It is white. And it has, it can see normal during the day. It's called a commodity bear, named for the naturalist whose last name was Commodity. And we even in Alaska have some blue ones. These were called blue glacier bears, which almost have an iridescent look when you see them in person. And so they can vary quite a bit. This bear doesn't quite know what it wants to be, but it does know that it wants a little bit of business in the front, party in the back. Here we have a bear kind of introducing himself. And so why are the bears showing up here? So this is a very long story that I won't get too in depth into. But bears were kind of relegated to areas that weren't great habitat due to the expansion of colonization of this country. And so they didn't produce a lot of cubs. And what bears can do is they can produce a lot more cubs when they can eat a lot more food. So females will have more young the more that they can eat. They have what's called delayed implantation. And so if they don't make up enough food in the fall, they don't produce as many eggs and they don't produce as many young. So what we have is, as bears expanded from those areas we had relegated them to, they ran into better foods. All the things that we had planted, orchards, crop fields, and all the things that humans have provided now were great foods for them too, and allowed them to produce more young and start to expand. And as you see here in New Jersey, here's from 1995 to 2014. The expansion has just gone on. Here's New York's expansion from 1995 to 2007. You'll see all the blue is where it expanded. And now we look at some of the range maps more recent. You'll see that our area here is covered for secondary range. You'll see that New Jersey's almost entirely covered. There's lots of areas of Connecticut and Massachusetts, some areas that people don't realize there's bears. But one of the real things is, no matter what map you look at, it's going to be wrong because bears are continuing to expand. And so, it's always being updated. It's never correct because we have expansion literally annually. And probably some of you are asking, what does secondary mean? Well, primary means you have young being produced in those areas. Females are denning and having babies. Secondary range means there's bears there that have territories, mostly males, some young females, but they're not yet producing cubs. And that's one thing that we wanted to look at in our research. And so these are all of our partners for our research project that we did over in 2017 to 2019. And as I mentioned, when we were opening up, the Pound Ridge Lynx Conservancy is on there and one of our partners. And we used the Isaacson Preserve to put one of our cameras up as a location. And I'm happy to say we'll be bringing the research back and doing the project again, starting probably in 2023. And so we'll set up cameras again and we'll see what the difference is between our 2017 to 2019 study and our 23 to 26 study, and see if we've changed, we've expanded, and we now have breeding females. But a lot of great partners. The top 4 partners, the reason they're a little larger is what they actually provided staff that went out and actually checked cameras for us. And Great Hollow Preserve, if you guys have not been there, I'll give a little plug for them too. It's an amazing preserve up in Fairfield County, Connecticut, kind of, not far from Pawlings, kind of just north of the Candlewood Lake area. And they got a great place up there. They do a lot of research too, very similar to what we do at Mianus River Gorge. And they have a ton of bears in that area. And so you'll see a lot of the bear pictures that we have are from their cluster of cameras. And so each area had a cluster of cameras. We had a cluster up in northern Fairfield and Putnam County. We had a cluster in Westchester, and we had a cluster over in Fairfax, or in Fairfield County, Connecticut, near Reading. And so what we learned from the project is we were going to get bears. Actually, let me step back. What I'd like to do real quick is to show real quick about how we set stuff up. This will give you kind of a rundown of what happened. So we would take each tree, set up a camera, and can you guys see this? Okay. And so I'm just gonna kind of go through this series of photos here. It's kind of this little slideshow. So this is our one of our helpers up in the Great Hollow area. He's setting up the camera. Cameras we're looking from, and the tree he's at is where we put the bait on it. And we used anise paste bait, which is the same thing that makes black licorice smell. Study found that that was one of the best attractants for bears. We also used a strawberry scent in one season. We used some kind of a barbecue smell. We used some different little scent baits that were real stinky. But I tried it with every time when I bait for bears, I use at least 4 scents because bears have particular tastes. And some bears don't like a certain smell, other bears do. And so you'll get as many you can, I bring in several scents. And so he put the bait up, and then he wanders off. And then each of these is different nights that we have it set up, but we're not catching anything on the camera. It's just taking it so we know that we are tracking every night and the camera's not off. And this gives us our nights of coverage. And then about 4 nights in, here comes a bear. And the bear wanders on up. And so he's put bait on the large tree there. He's also put bait on the small tree, and he's hung the little canisters of different things. And so that cloth is the one that's covered in anise paste. And so the bear goes right to that and starts yanking on it and chewing on it. And then the little cup has some strawberry oil, or that one actually I think was some salmon oil in that cup. And he's gonna kind of pour on that and everything. And he plays around a little bit, and he can't get off the tree. And so what we can do is by getting these bears to stand, we can find identifiable marks. And so on this bear here, you'll see the white mark on the chest. That helps us identify that bear, that individual. When they stand up too, we'll be able to tell usually if it's a male or a female. And so this helps for our identification. And so he continues to play. And for the great thing is for most bears, we don't get a picture or two. Most bears on average gave us about 80 photos. Yeah, this is pretty common that we get that almost on every bear photo, bear set. He comes over and eats the camera, licks it. We had one bear, we called him the camera licker because he didn't even go to the bait. He would just come to the camera, lick the camera, and then walk away. So, and you'll see, if you can walk him there a little bit, he's just got that little tail. There's a couple, pieces of brush stuck to it, but there's a little tiny tail there he's got. So that, as I was mentioning his tail before, and he goes back over. Now he's going to go back over, push on the tree, and he gives up and heads off. And there's a great look last of his foot. You can see that kind of plantigrade, nice flat foot there. So I wanted to show that I felt like it was a good little thing to show how kind of our process of what it was and what we were looking for in our photos. So jumping back into the presentation here. So these bears showed up, and they would come to locations, and we would get to, and we actually didn't realize how easy it would be to identify different individuals. But every individual looks like different coloration on the face slightly, particularly the muzzle. They walk slightly different. They have a little bit different hair. Some have a little bit of a ruff down their back. Some of them are a little thin in certain spots. They've got the white blaze. Some is size. So because we were able to have them stand and use those poles, they'll rub against the trees. And so we can see that, these two bears, this is the same exact camera location. And so if you see them, now we can get the perspective of different heights of bears. So you see the lichen on the tree, the light green lichen right by the nose of the one bear, that's quite higher than the other bear. And then this bear is the last bear I mentioned when they get over 6 feet tall. This guy here is a monster. He's a dump truck of a bear. And this one's up, and I'm glad that this one's in Great Hollow Preserve. I don't have to deal with him. But all 3 of these bears, different bears, showed up at this same location within a 2-week period. So they will visit the same locations. They don't spend time together at any time of year other than when the male and female get together in June for a rendezvous. And so that's the only time they're really together. But they will visit locations, and they'll come back around. All of these bears visited this location at least one more time. And we got lots of great photos. I believe, let's see, this photo here. This one is the bear that was in Leon Levy and Ward Pound Ridge in 2017. This one here is a female. She's up in Great Hollow area in Putnam County. This one's in Putnam County too. He's tagged, and you'll see him again later on, but he's up at Great Hollow Preserve. This is actually bear in Leon Levy Preserve here. And then this one was in Redding. He's another dump truck, real big bear. He's probably until this year. That photo you saw there was actually, that last photo I showed was in 2019 bear. This was a 2017 and 2018 bear. He was my biggest bear until that 2019 bear showed up north, but this other one was in Redding. And then this bear, actually, this is the same bear with the white chest blaze before that I saw before, but now she's got 2 cubs that came in behind her. And these are 2nd-year cubs. And so here's where I want to talk a little bit about when we get cubs, because we'll have cubs that are, people say, well, it has cubs, so that means it's female with cubs in an area. Well, it has to be 1st-year cubs. Cubs stay with a female for 2 years. They'll den with her again, and then they're considered yearlings. So I'll call them cubs because they're still with her, but they're yearlings. They're the 2nd year. And at that point, they can travel quite a bit of distance. So what we're actually looking for is cubs like this. When we're looking for a cub, to say that bear is breeding in the area. This, if you can see, is that same tree up there. Both of these are that same tree, 2 different bears. One's a male. This is a female with cubs at that same tree in Great Hollow Preserve. That tree, those bears love that spot. But this one had a bunch of cubs with it. And this is what we're looking for. And this is a different location with a bunch of little babies. These ones were early. These were May, and these were little cubs. So we know they're probably within about a mile of their den, somewhere within the mile area. So we definitely know the den is nearby. And so that's what we were really looking for in Westchester County. And we never found it in the 3 years of the study. The closest we found was we had cubs in Putnam County, obviously, at Great Hollow in that area, at the, I think it's called, there's a well, on Haviland Road, there is a wildlife management area. There's been cubs there, up near Paulings. And then we had cubs in Redding in 2019. And that was our furthest documentation and anybody's documentation of cubs into southern part of Fairfield County that anybody has done. So here's another cub. And all of these were 2018. So when we only had 2nd-year cubs in 2017. All the 1st-year cubs were the following year, because a lot of the females that had the 2nd-year cubs, their cubs take off, they breed, and then the next year they're going to have those 1st-year cubs. And I thought this was just a great photo. This bear just sitting here enjoying the day. This one here was this is just behind my house in the Minas River Gorge. This one is at, so prospective, some folks know this area. This is Devil's Den over in Connecticut, hiking area, and area for the Nature Conservancy. So these were some 2019 photos. I don't have a bunch of those. They're all back at the office. I meant to get 2019 project stuff done in 2020. Well, that didn't happen because our office shut down and all my photos are still there. So I had a few that I was able to grab. These are just going to be ones from up in Putnam County in northern Fairfield County. So this bear here was the one I showed you the kind of the clipping of before. This is the dump truck that was standing up before. Now this is him down. He's got a very large head. He probably weighs, looking at his size when he stood coming down, and you're talking spring, he's probably 450 pounds. He'll probably be 550 by the time he goes into the den. Very large bear. Here's another bear, and you look at a bear like this bear is probably 100 pounds, young male. And this is what we mostly see around here are these smaller young male bears. And I like this photo because he's got he's kind of sniffing at the cloth there, and he's got the little cup hanging over top of his head and just kind of chilling at the tree. And then what we also got is we got some photos from the public. And this here is in Pound Ridge off of Bob Hill Road. This one's in Reading. Actually, this the guy who took this picture is a polar bear researcher. And so he came back from researching polar bears up in Hudson Bay and Churchill, and he came back and there was a bear trying to get into his stuff on the porch. And so you'd notice it has ear tags. Some of these bears have been captured before. This bear has a small metal ear tags, which means it was caught with its mother. The mother was given larger ear tags and the cub was given these small ones when they got in trouble somewhere. Here's another bear in Pound Ridge. This one took down a birdhouse or bird feeder. These are all ones that were submitted by the public, all of these photos. This one here is that bear with the tag we saw from before. This is actually 6 months later. The bear is now in Reading, Connecticut, when before it was in Putnam, New York. So they can travel and get around. This bear was originally tagged north of Waterbury. And then this bear was actually given to me by Dan Atkinson on somebody's trail camera, I believe near Ward Pound Ridge. So that's a few from the public. I get quite a few. A lot of them are still at the office, as I mentioned, for adding new ones. But yeah, I always get photos. And if you have a photo of a bear and you give me a location, please send it along. Because again, the study is going to start back up and we'll be looking for locations to put cameras. So knowing where bears already are is always great when we're trying to look at size and different bears hitting a similar location. So I really wanted to get in now. That's kind of what our work was, but you're probably concerned about what, bears coming into Pound Ridge. And, we didn't see breeding bears, in our study in Pound Ridge. So we haven't seen those cubs yet. But really what we still have bears there. We have those young male bears coming in. Sometimes now we have young female bears in the area. And so what do you do? So what do we do if we see a bear and it's the woods? The biggest thing is enjoy it. Keep your distance, take a picture, and enjoy the experience. Stay quiet. And then when you have the opportunity, back away. Never approach a bear. Particularly bears are usually doing something that they don't really know you're there, like enjoying what he's doing here, scratching or digging in the ground for insects or scenting. And a lot of times when they're scenting, they're not concentrating on their eyes and they're walking a trail, and they can walk right into you because they don't even know you're there ahead of you. Because when you concentrate on one sense too, a lot of times you'll be like, okay, here's something. You'll kind of wander your head into something because you're trying to listen. The same thing. They're concentrating on one scent, and a lot of times it's not on their eyes because they're smelling and hearing things away from them, and that's what they're concentrating on. They use their eyes when they get close so they can actually do whatever they need to. And so you can bump into them easily. So the biggest thing is if you do see a bear and it is approaching you down this trail, say this bear were to drop down and start walking towards us here on that trail, you just want to let the bear know you're there. And so all you really want to do is give a quick little, hey bear, like that. You don't want to scream. You don't want to yell too loud and startle him, but you just want to start, and bring it up. So, hey bear, and then start bringing it a little louder each time, but don't start out with the really loud one. If he ignores you, you can go ahead and open your jacket up or shirt, make it wide, and do the same thing. And raise your arms up and go, hey bear, and woggle back and forth. You're trying to do anything you can to make yourself look bigger than him. Bears do not like confrontation at all. But also the same thing is sometimes they'll just be like, I'm used to people. I'm going my way. This is the way I'm going. So as you do that, I always recommend to people, not only should you be backing up slightly as you're yelling, kind of yelling at that bear, but you should be stepping slightly off the trail, because sometimes in a lot of our preserves and a lot of places we hike, it's pretty dense, and bears like the easiest path to get through, and that is the trail that you're on as well. And so their escape cover may be behind you where they want to go to, particularly if it's a wetland area or if it's really dense. They'll want to get into that cover. They're not going to want to go into an open area. And so it may just want to come past you, and you just need to get out of the way too. And so a lot of times just get out of the way, step off the trail, and let it move through is the biggest thing you need to do. But make it aware that you're there, and it usually will not have any kind of issue.
Hey, Bud, could I add or ask a related part of what about if people have a dog? What could they do to avoid the conflict there?
Well, always hike with your dog on a leash. That is key. Almost all dog-related fatalities with bears occur with an unleashed dog because the dog runs to the bear and the bear defends itself. And I can show these, but a bear has about a 2-inch or so claw. This is a fairly short one here. A bear has about a 2-inch claw, and they're very strong. Their upper sections are meant for climbing trees, and so one swipe and they can kill a dog. Not even meaning to kill, but meaning to defend. And so the key is to keep them on the leash. If you've got a bigger dog and you need to back off the trail, you need to pull your dog in tight to you, keep it tight. If it's barking, that's fine. The bear knows that something's there. But you want to keep it tight to you, and you don't want it to get to the bear. The bear will not come to it. It will go to the bear. That's always been the issue. Everything else, you may see some like rare thing happen, and we get a lot of news coverage on it. It's extremely rare for a bear to actually come over to the dog and attack it, to chase a person to attack them. Those are rare occurrences. We've actually seen more of those in areas where where these black bears also live with grizzly bears, a much more aggressive bear, and so they pick up some of those aggressive tendencies to survive. And so the next step is seeing them in your yard. This is when people start to have concern. I'm fine with the bears in the woods. I just don't want them in my yard. But most of the time, this is what we see. If you're doing what you need to do, the bear is just going to wander on through. The biggest thing to keep the situation is by April 1st, take down all your bird feeders, clean up the ground where your bird feeder was, and then don't put your bird feeder back up until December 1st. I'm a bird guy. I spent most of my career actually doing bird work. And the birds don't need any kind of seed or food during the summer. Some people like to feed and see the birds even during the summer, and they do the jellies. If you do all of that, I recommend elevating it or keeping it as close to the house as possible. Those type of things. Mount it off a porch or something like that. Keep it close to the house. Keep it up into the grassy area. Most of the bird feeders we see taken are near the wood's edge, or near a stream. But these corridors where a bear is going to come through already. And then once they find a bird feeder, that's when it leads to them finding other stuff in your yard. But if you do the proper things, again, the bear is going to walk through, enjoy it, take a picture, and let us know you saw it. Here is the situation where things start to go downhill. And you can tell that this is not before April, these bird feeders, and not after December. Here that it's definitely summertime and there's bird seed here, and the bear has gotten the feeder, and he will take those black poles that are not cheap and bring those down and pull apart those feeders. And I've seen bears just pull a feeder down and have a big pile and lay on the ground and just push the feed into their mouth with one paw, just sliding it into their face. Because they want to spend as little energy as possible on a meal. And that's why bird seed is such an easy meal for them. I mean, it's just protein hanging from trees. It's protein hanging from metal trees at bear height. I mean, it's like perfect. It's like, oh my God, you put up a bear feeder for me. And so that's what really is the number one draw for bears in the whole eastern U.S. Garbage is the draw for bears in the West, and you don't see the bird feeding there. But bird feed is the number one draw for a bear to a residential area in the eastern U.S. Now, once they're there for a bird feeder, they will find your grill and they will disassemble it until they find the grease tray. and take that grill entirely apart. And then they'll take apart your garbage, and then they'll take apart your pool and your swing sets and anything else they can play with, because bears are extremely curious and love to play. The key is when you see this bear right at this moment, he started on your feeder, you need to scare him away. This is like the kid who gets in and grabs a cookie and you let him do it and he does it again and he does it again because you didn't tell him no. And so you got to, at this point, yell at that bear out the window. You got to maybe bang a couple pans together. You've got to make, do anything you can. People say, oh, I'll turn the sprinklers on. Well, bears during the summertime love water. So you may have just made it even more enticing, because now you know he's getting a bath while eating. I mean, that's just like a bear's dream. And so, really it's those loud noises they're not used to. Sometimes they're used to, people yelling and used to dogs. So pieces of metal banged together, even keys. They don't like the sound of like keys shaking, dinner bells, anything that you've got that can make a metal sound particularly will scare them off. What you did see with all of our photos, and what is nice, is that we see most of those photos are during the day. About 80% of our photos of bears were during the day. And when we see bears become real problem bears, they become nocturnal. And so nocturnal bears, we know, are now becoming a problem. They're adapting to humans. They're becoming more elusive, and then they tend to get themselves into more trouble. The great thing is our bears are still acting like normal bears. Virtually everyone we got in Westchester was a bear during the daytime, and bears are active during the day, and that's where we want them to be. So you want to scare them off, because if you don't scare the bears off, then it leads to bears on porches. And if you don't have an attack cat like this one that can scare the bear away, again, as I mentioned, bears do not like confrontation. And I've seen actually cats outside scare bears away like this. And so, pets, we know some of the issues with pets and coyotes. We don't find it's, when some of the studies, it's not as full blown as people think it is with pets and coyotes. We have cats in New York City that are living right next to a coyote den, and we see them constantly on the cameras, and it's like, okay, how are you still alive? And they're still there. But we don't usually see bears take pets. Most time, if a pet is outside and the bear is not cornered or not startled, and the animal barks or the cat hisses or something like that, the bear will back off. They are just kind of sissies, and they just, all they want is a meal, and they want it the easiest way possible. But this bear has already been fed somewhere, and he realizes human inhabitants are places where potentially I could get in. And here is our worst situation, and this almost leads to almost every bear that has to be put down, is a bear inside a house. And these always make the news, and so you always get to see these and hear about these. But it happens a lot. And it happens more commonly in places where bears are really more common than here. Places like Maine and the Adirondacks, and also places where there's cabins with less, decent doors and, screen doors and things like that, where these bears are getting in. But once a bear is inside a house, most of the time at that point, that's a situation where, the bear is in your house. You need to take cover somewhere, either get yourself out of the house if you can around the bear safely, because once you're in a closed area with him, unlike before where you can just let him pass by, now he is scared too, because now he sees you. He's going to want to get away. He can't get out, and that's when a bear does decide to defend himself. And this is a situation where you really want to have kind of the local law enforcement officer, conservation law enforcement officer in your phone, and be able to call that person if you have to stay inside the house. And so the biggest thing to do is find a closed room, a bathroom, something like that, get in there, call the conservation officer, call the New York Department of New York Department of Environmental Conservation, and they'll send somebody, and 90% of the time it'll be lethal what they do for that bear. So, but this is what we're trying to avoid with all bears, and why we want to live with them the right way. So here's those numbers. Really, most of you are going to have that top number that's bolded there. You know, sightings, damage. You know, if you have something, if you have a bear that actually takes down your feeders, knocks over some stuff in the yard, call the number and let them know. They're not going to come down and take care of that bear. So you don't have to worry about it. If say you don't want the bear, like I don't want the bear harassed or taken away, you're just reporting the damage. It's something they need for assessing bears in the state. It's something they put together for getting federal funding as well. So they need to know damage of occurring in different places, and they also like to know sightings. They like to know if we're how many bears we're seeing in a certain area, and if we need more public education. We know that that's going to be the number one thing for bears. Hunting is usually not a limiting factor for bears, and in many places where these suburban bears are coming in, hunting bears in those areas is not even going to be allowed. And so it's going to be a matter of having the public learn to live with these bears the right way. And so I'll just leave that one up there so folks can take a screenshot of it if they want, or they can take a camera photo of it if they want. For some of the numbers, again, we're going to start monitoring the H2H bear site here soon again in next couple of years, as we start to build up some encounters when we're determining where to put new cameras at. And that's our office number right now. You can always leave a voicemail, mention where you see the bear. The biggest thing we need to know is an address, where you saw the bear, at, kind of a location, an address, a date, and a time always helps us out. And then really the biggest thing is if we can get a good photo, if you've gotten a photo of them, send it through that H2H Bears Gmail, or you can email it to me. And I can have Andrew put my email into the chat, along with our website for the Mianus River Gorge. So mianus.org, and my email, budd, BUDD, @mianus.org. Okay. That's the bear in Leon Levy Preserve. He's yanking that little tree down. Now, some folks come in and I know that is a euonymus, and some folks come in and did some management, took out the euonymus, but I didn't see the bear again for another 2 years in that area. So he liked that tree. He came to that tree a couple times, and then we tried to bait a different tree nearby, and nope, didn't show up. So he enjoyed that one.
Yeah, we need him to come back and do some invasive removal.
Yeah. So.
We've had similar with our beavers are taking out some invasive stuff too. So now we need to train the bears.
Yeah, and great one with this little bear here. Great one with him is he came down. We were able to track him to Leon Levy. Actually had a report of him just in Connecticut, Leon Levy Preserve. Caught him on a camera in Ward Pound Ridge, and then caught him back in Leon Levy and back over, and somebody reported him back in Connecticut in kind of a 3-week cycle. And so that's how these young males move.
Awesome. Hey, Bud, can you repeat your just email address?
Well, now that I'm out, I can throw it in there.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bud, for this wonderful talk. I think everybody, you can see how many people showed up. Everybody's interested in what's going on with the black bears here. So thank you very much. So we do have quite a few questions, and you did answer some of them during the talk, but so the first one is from Barbara Gerson. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Are we all seeing the same bear, or is there more than one in Pound Ridge? So it sounds like you kind of answered that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we can have multiple bears. It a lot of times depends on the time of year too. Early in the season, right now, it's probably just one bear. We have a couple resident bears that are in the area. Um, One actually spends the winter in, we think, denned in Pound Ridge, but within the Minas River Gorge portion of Pound Ridge. Uh, Male, and he's the one that continues to get fed at one of our properties that they put a lot of corn on the ground and things like that. One of our neighbors. Um, and he comes into our deer bait stations too during the winter as well. Though this year with the snow, everybody denned. We had no reports of any bears out during the winter this year. Last year, we had lots of bears that did not den. And if bears continue to find food, they won't den. But yeah, we had them in. So by midsummer, yeah, there could be a couple bears wandering around. Usually you have one or, maybe one larger bear and then a couple of these smaller guys that are transients moving in from somewhere else. They've been kicked out from their mothers so she can, meet another mature male and reproduce again. And so the young males will start wandering and getting into trouble. And so those are the ones we usually see.
Awesome. So your estimate on population is for our town and our local area is pretty small then.
I would say over the whole, I would say between probably Lewisboro and Pound Ridge and Bedford, North Castle, Cross River area, we've probably maybe got 2 resident bears.
Okay.
Just a couple. Males don't tolerate other males too much in established ranges. They'll tolerate females in established ranges. I haven't found an established female range yet. We haven't had I haven't had any footage or photos sent to me of any first year cubs. And so, we say we can have some residents. We're in that secondary range, but we don't have those, that reproduction yet.
Yeah.
And so when you really talk about population, when you say that, what the population is, that's when you want to producing animals. And, but again, but they say everywhere, no one can really tell you what the population of a bear is unless they go out and actually find every bear, which
right.
you can't do.
Right.
We did do a great job on our project, but at best with any camera project and any bear study project is 20% of the bears you're finding.
Yeah.
So, so when we would find one in our whole region for Westchester in a year, you'd assume for 20% we found, there's probably 4 or 5 in the area, but probably half of those are transients.
So we have a more general question from Fiona Mitchell. Is there any evidence of black bears interbreeding with grizzlies or other species as bear range changes with climate change?
No, we don't have it. No, they don't interbreed with different species. That's what makes them species, separate species. Black bears and grizzly bears have coexisted for a millennia, or more. They've been around since before the Ice Age, both species, and so they're here. They live. They've coexisted, but where they are together, black bears pick up some traits. Tend to be more aggressive because they have to defend themselves against highly aggressive grizzly bears. They can sometimes be a little more aggressive with their cubs out in that area, where in the eastern part of the country, they don't really defend their cubs. So you don't see the same type of things. Where we have seen some issues with climate change is in Alaska, where glaciers have receded and those iridescent glacier bears or blue bears that we have, they're actually disappearing because the regular phase colored black bears are coming into the area, breeding into the population, and that recessive trait is disappearing. And so because they were isolated by glaciers, those glacier bears are coming down so we're losing that blue phase bear. Probably within about 30 years, you will be very hard pressed to find a blue phase bear.
Right. And that blue phase bear, is it genetically the same as a normal black bear,
Yeah.
other than
So
outward
when we
trait?
talk, it's a subspecies. So
Okay.
subspecies are typically genetically the same, but isolated due to some kind of barrier of range or location, as an island or some kind of barrier, like the glaciers were.
Awesome. A little back to closer home. I think you might have mentioned this, but Matt Wynn says, what location had a lot of bears on their cameras, or I guess what area had the most bears?
The area up kind of centering right on Great Hollow Preserve. So if you look up Great Hollow Preserve on the map, that area had the most bears of our camera study. And there's an intense amount of bears up there.
So
at one camera, the first season at one camera, we had 11 different bears.
Wow. So that's people's kind of best bet if they want to see actually.
Yeah,
go
if you want to see if you have a chance of bumping into a bear, go hike around that area or some of the wildlife management areas in that area. We had cameras at 9 different public and private preserved lands up in that area, and 7 of our or 8 of our 9 cameras ended up with a bear on them at some point during the study.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Dan Atchison, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but he said, being that mature bears are typically solitary, do home ranges overlap, or are they too territorial for that? So it sounds like the residential bears, their territories are fairly separate, but you can have bears passing through.
Yeah, so young bears will pass through. Older bears will tolerate young bears when it's not breeding season, and they'll even feed sometimes the same location when it's not, particularly June. June is the month when they're tend to be breeding, and the large males tend to be aggressive, and they're aggressive towards other bears. Aggressive. They're not going to be aggressive towards humans, but they're aggressive towards other bears because they're looking for a female to breed. And so what we really want to see is, with the territories, you'll see sometimes where the males will overlap just slightly. And in those locations, when they kind of run into each other, they will fight. Their fighting is kind of this: they open their mouths, they butt their heads together. They'll sometimes bite at each other's necks and the tops of their heads. And that's why their heads are so heavy, because they'll bite at each other's heads. And so they kind of almost build up a heavy fat on top of the head. And so they will fight a bit that way. But mainly what they want to do, they want to cover as many female ranges as possible. So a male range is over 10 miles across. Female ranges are about 3 miles. And so they can fit several female ranges within their range and breed those different females.
Sure. Kathleen Matthews asked, what is your closest encounter with a bear?
Well, my encounters are how you would, are not typical encounters with bears. I've had to, working with bears, we tranquilized the bear, and I crawled inside the culvert trap with the bear and laid on top of it. And then it breathed, and I got lifted up in the air as it breathed, like cool. That. And to me, that was the greatest moment of my life at that point. So, and I had to drag that bear, which we had sedated, out of that trap, kind of dragging it underneath me and hugging it as we went along. So that would be my closest encounter, cheek to cheek. I've been licked by a bear before. As each bear gets a tattoo inside of their lip, and as I was tattooing, the bear's licking my hand. In the wild, I was camping in Virginia, and we had a bear come into the campsite, and it was pretty close. That was only about maybe 20 yards away. But last July, I had a bear come down through the yard at my house here in the Mias River Gorge. And it started to head towards the road. So I followed it up a little bit, just seeing, I wanted to track it and see where it was going to head, because the house across the way was fenced. I wanted to see how it moved up the roadway, because I know the bear has been moving this way before. We've had them on camera, and I want to know how it was crossing the road in that section. Well, just as it got to the road, it almost got hit by a car, turned around, came back into my woodlot, And so we got face to face. I just backed up and let it work its way back towards me. I backed down the driveway. When it come back across the top of the driveway, it turned at my trash can, knocked it over. I had to go yell at it to tell it to not, get away, because it decided it was going to try and get in the trash. So I went and yelled at it, and it ran across the street, got on a stone wall, and walked off. So that's the most recent encounter I've had with it.
Awesome. And a great example of maybe not necessarily tracking it for the average person, but what to do in the different scenarios.
Yeah. I don't recommend following the bear. Like I said, I was doing it based on some of the data we've been looking at and trying to figure out how the bear was moving from between my lot and the next lot down. Because we have several separate lots there. And I wanted to know if it was crossing into this other lot that we're potentially thinking about adding to the gorge, or going this other way and down the street. So it was an interesting, I wonder if it was like, I got to see where this bear is heading.
Yeah.
Then he almost got hit by the car, turned around and came back.
Awesome. We got time for maybe one or two more. Pamela Corey asks, what does to den or denning mean?
Okay, so a den is the location where they go and they hibernate. As I said, hibernate before. And so for a lot of bears, that is just a spot on the ground, maybe under some fallen branches, where a tree has come down. The bear that we went and did the den location of in March with DEC last March, that was a bear that was just open, down in some laurel in the state park up there. Down a little bit of laurel, but there was fallen branches, kind of an area. Had just carved it out and set right down and had 4 cubs right there. Spent the winter like that. They don't get into a cave. They don't like rock structure. Rock structures hold too much scent and they stay too cold. And so they tend to go towards wood cavities. They love burrowing under trees where a tree is uprooted a little bit. They'll go into there, dig that all out, make a hollow underneath. And we're always looking for, and the DEC is looking for dens in this part of the state, because we've been trying to get a collar on a bear down here. Mm-hmm. And so if we can find a den, that would be awesome to try to get a collar on a bear in this area. So if you see something that looks like a den, even during the, not during the winter or something like that, take a photo and send it our way. But a lot of times it'll be a large cavity in there, kind of the size, I would say, of maybe about 4 feet across, at least 3 feet high, allowed them to get in there. But I've seen them in some pretty small spots with like 5 cubs. And a den can be anywhere. I've seen it under somebody's house in the crawl space, literally under their bed. I've seen it in the back of a Chevette car, like an old Chevy Chevette in the trunk, where they had torn all the seats up and then used all the foam as the cushioning. I've seen just about everything.
Wow. I think we'll do one more here. I have a similar question. So Dan asks about, from your current understanding of where breeding females reside, how many years would you assume before expansion leads to our area becoming a more established primary home range?
I really think we could be anytime. Anytime we can have a female with cubs.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting one of these younger females. And what it is saying that up in Reading, or where we were in Great Hollow, those cubs that were 2 years old, those 1-year-old cubs there, if one of those was a female, she has to wander off from them in 2017. Now that's been 4 or 5 years. A female may start breeding as early as 6. So we're getting into that time zone where some of those ones that had cubs not too far away, those cubs can now be maturing enough to the point, if they'd gotten into the area, to be able to breed. So I feel like the next set of studies will get cubs in that grouping.
Yeah. So it just highlights the need, why the need for recurring
recurring studies. So this is, I just want to quick before we go, this is the camera we use right here. This is a Reconyx camera. You know, it has loads batteries inside here. So you'll see if I get my screen.
Wow, yeah,
blurred
that's
out.
a
12
lot more
batteries
than
it
the
takes.
average camera.
You know, they're about $500 a piece. There are some simpler, easier, cheaper ones than that. But you know, getting a few cameras and putting cameras up on a couple places is always a great thing to do, because you never know when you can see. Several of the bears we had were on cameras that we didn't own. Ward Pound Ridge had cameras of their own, and we got photos from them on their cameras. The bear skipped over our bait and went to their cameras. So, you know, another thing here, just another sample I you know, want to highlight is, you know, a bear here. When you do spot a black bear, and if they be traveling too, their butt is higher than their shoulder. A grizzly bear, their shoulder is higher than their butt. And that's an easy way to tell. Say if you're in Yellowstone, you want to ID a bear or something like that. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bud, so much for volunteering your time tonight and doing this for the residents of Pound Ridge. I learned a lot, and I think a lot of other people did too. Bud, are you doing internships this summer?
Yeah. So for a little bit for the gorge, we're getting our interns in this summer. You know, we always take volunteers as well on the gorge. You know, you can find all of our stuff on our website, or you can email me about what's coming up. We do hikes, different hikes into the gorge. We do several educational programs on tree identification. We have a bird walk on the 22nd. Sometimes I'll get Tate Johansson to go on that with us from Bedford Audubon. But again, I've been doing songbirds for most of my life, so yeah. I'm pretty decent at them. I'm just not really great at songs, but I can ID any of them by sight. So we get out there and we do a few of those. So we've got some things. That 22nd of May is when that one is. So we're always looking, you know, we've always got events. Check out our calendar of events. You know, we focus a lot of our efforts in the gorge on research, and really try to make that an important aspect. And we also take high school students who do research projects. And what was this project here that we did was actually led by a high school student. And he's now a college sophomore at Duke University in the field of conservation law. And awesome. So the next project as well, that when we come up, will be led by another high school student. So we're awesome. Always proud of our high school students and the work they do.
Great. Well, thank you, Bud. You all have Bud's contact info in the chat, and be sure to check out their website, and as well as the Pound Ridge Land Conservancies. That's prlc.net. We look forward to seeing some people who are also interested in coming out and volunteering with both organizations. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the local natural history in your area. So again, thank you, Bud. And with that, we'll say goodnight to everybody.